Most people think legacy starts when you have money. It doesn't. It starts by making decisions. And for a lot of people, that's exactly where things get delayed. I'm Garrick Francis. This is the Inheritance to Income podcast, where we help families, founders, and leaders move from legacy by default to legacy by design. So it's crafted in wisdom, not chaos. If you're building something for the next generation, but you're not quite sure what comes next, you're in the right place. I'm your legacy advocate. Let's talk about it. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to go back inside the Legacy Bridge Roundtable and pull out some of the most important insights for people who are just getting started. Because one of the biggest misconceptions I hear is, I don't have enough to start. But what you're going to hear from this conversation is that legacy doesn't begin with assets. It begins with clarity, with intentionality, and with decisions. So as you listen, I want you to think about this. Not what you have, but what decisions you've already delayed. So let's talk about it. The first clip really thinks about how most people think legacy is for people with a lot, but I want you to listen to how Aimee reframes that.
And it is not that we have to be gazillionaires to change lives, right? We just have to have the commitment to planning, thoughtfulness, intentionality to be transformational.
So legacy is not about how much you have. It's about who you love, and it's about your desire and willingness to get started, to take a single action, to look up a counselor, to write down your assets, to start to make a difference just bit by bit by bit. And what we see when we do that is that over time, your assets will grow, your impact will grow, your influence will grow, so that when you have just started with that little bit, with that mustard seed, what you can do by the time your life has transcended, you will be able to make an extremely large impact on the lives of your family and of your community and of those all around you. So when we start thinking about the next generation, now that we've started, we can shift from money to meaning. And so it's not just about the money. So you're asking then, what is it about? I think Tacy does a really good job of framing up when she says what it's about is the next generation.
Well, I think about what you want for the next generation and the next generation, and I think about what does that look like? And I often start with feelings, whereas opposed to money. What do you want that next generation and that next generation to feel? Because then you can build the finances around what you want them to feel. Do you want them to feel joy? Do you want them to feel giving? What does that look like? So that's it.
And so I think, notice this, Tacy, a certified financial planner, doesn't start with assets. She starts with how the next generation should feel. And that's a completely different starting point. Should they feel empowered? Should they feel secure? Should they feel charitable? Should they feel influential? What is it you're hoping for your next generation and your children's children to feel? And if you start at that point and work backwards, then you can set up your structure. You can align your assets. You can create roles, responsibilities, and authority that actually make that happen. And so that's a great place to think about, even though we're talking about structure of estate planning and financial planning and property setup and succession. You really want to start with, how do people feel? What are their values? What's important to them? Which will then set you up to do all those different types of things when it comes to planning. And to do that, I think there's a point where you have to be intentional and you have to be honest. So how do you actually begin being intentional? And I think Shakisha does a really good job of setting up the intentionality.
Intentionality starts with honesty. So I think most people would think intentionality starts with a choice, but I think it starts with honesty because intentionality is about going forward, but you can't go forward without looking back. And if you're looking back, you need to be honest about what it is you've experienced, what it is you've seen, what it is you want to be different. And then the choice follows that honesty.
And so when you think about intentionality, Shakisha says intentionality doesn't start with a choice, it starts with honesty. So you have to be honest with what is it that you have. And we're not just talking about your assets. We are talking about your values. What are you going to pass down? What capabilities are in your family to manage the assets in the future? Do you have to take time to create a development plan for your children and your children's children? If you do those types of things, then you will prepare them, because I always say inheritance has to come with instructions. And so if we're going to provide the instruction, you can set up processes to do that. You can engage your children and your grandchildren. You can work with your siblings and your cousins to make sure everybody understands the roles and responsibilities and the authority and the assets and what we have and what we're trying to accomplish. That's all of what goes into what I call your family succession plan. We spend millions of dollars on corporate succession planning, but we spend very little time, money, or effort on family succession planning and succession planning for small businesses. And so once we've begun to establish this, we then have to look inward and think about who we are as people and what's important to us and how we are going to be moving forward. And for some people who don't have children, don't have biological heirs, that conversation, you would think it might be a little bit different. But I think Aimee gives a really good description of what that kind of a conversation could be like.
So again, starting with who you love, and usually that starts with me, right? I love me too, and so I care about the quality of my life, and so I want to know who are going to be the people around who are going to support me in my life as well, and so that's part of the estate planning as well. What we know is that people who are single with no kids have an extra special requirement and burden to be thoughtful about that, because those of us with married and who have kids, we have these sort of built-in people. Now, what we do know for truth is those people may not be the ones that we select as our truth, because we know we have to be honest with ourselves who they are and who we are and what the relationship looks like. But it is those people who don't have the natural bench as to who's going to make decisions for us. Those are the folks who need to be forthright moving forward. And I always say also that family is not necessarily solely defined by legal and biological relationships. And going back to who do we love?
And so when Aimee says, who do we love? And she says something very important. Legacy is not limited to our family structure. It's not limited to those who we are related to or who are our children. It can be. You can have nieces and nephews and cousins and brothers and sisters who you want to build into your estate and succession plan. But you also might have others who you are very close to. You might have charitable organizations that are built into your estate plan. You might have your church, your educational institution, parts of your community that you want to influence for generations. And so to be able to do that, you need to set things up. But it really is succession planning, business planning, family planning, estate planning is defined by who you love and who you're responsible for and who you want to pass your values and your valuables on to. And in doing that, the idea that I don't have, children of my own, or as my aunt used to say, Aunt Vivian didn't have children, and while she joked that I wouldn't have you, she left in place something for her nieces and her nephews. She left in place something for the children of the 4CNG group that she helped travel all over the country to expose them. She left in place a legacy for voting rights. that was her contribution, even though she never had biological children of her own. And so now that you've kind of set these things up, you kind of give yourself permission to begin. But sometimes you sit back and ask, well, where do I start? And starting looks complex, but it doesn't have to be. I think Tacy lays out a really good framework for starting out.
Well, I think part of it is making an appointment with someone. Just part of your, and that in itself is a step. Making an appointment with a financial planner or financial advisor who has been recommended to you, and just getting prepared mentally for that meeting is often big enough, right? Because a lot of folks didn't grow up with financial advisors or financial planners, so just making that leap is a big one in itself.
So getting started, finding an advisor, talking to someone at your bank or your church or your business or your place of employment about a recommendation for a financial advisor, a financial planner, an estate attorney, and making that first appointment, it changes your mindset. You're now in an active mindset that says, I am in the design mode. I want to design my legacy. I want to design my family's generational influence and generational impact. So by making the appointment, by having that first unaccustomed conversation, a lot of people stop before they get to that point because they don't think they have enough, because they're scared of what they might find, or they think they might be a little bit overwhelmed. And so this is how we get started in designing our legacy. And there are a couple of other easy steps that you can take, but let me pause here for a moment to tell you a little bit about our sponsor. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Inheritance to Income. Inheritance to Income is brought to you by Reese Francis Studios. Whether you're preserving something for the future or creating something for today, photography, videography, and editing. Check out the link in the show notes below or check reesefrancisstudios.com. And while I'm at it, let me just take a pause and say, if you hear something in this episode that resonates with you, something that is good for you, your family, your friends, please hit the like and subscribe button and share it with others. That will continue to help us getting our message out to a lot of different people. And so now let's get back into our rewind. So I talked a little bit about getting started. Just take that first step and make that appointment. But I think Shakisha does a really good job of giving maybe a couple of other practical steps, a little bit more practical advice of how to get started. Let's take a listen.
Well, what's going to be important about it is making sure that I give it to them in such a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, because the process feels overwhelming to a lot of people. So this is where sort of my teaching hat comes in, and I try to give them buckets, right? So 3 easy things. Tell me what your goals are, tell me what you have, and tell me who matters.
So Shakisha suggests 3 easy things. And this is a place where I really want you to take a minute, in fact, take 10 minutes, and write something down. She said, tell me what you want. Tell me what your goals are. And when we talk about those goals, and especially in our faith and finance class, we talk about making those SMART goals, making those very specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound SMART goals, and doing those in increments. So 0 to 24 months, 2 years, that's a short-term goal. 2 to 5 years is your midterm goal, and anything over 5 years we consider a long-term goal. We're not going to focus too much right now on over 5 years, though that's where we talk about next generation stuff. When we talk about generational goals, what are the goals you have for your family and your business across generations? But for now, let's just focus on writing down a couple of SMART goals for what you want to achieve in the next 24 months and what you want to achieve in the next 2 to 5 years for your family as part of your family succession plan and your small business succession plan and your estate plan. What you have. You want to write down what your assets are and what your liabilities are, because your liabilities are also part of your estate. They get passed down. And then you want to write down who matters. What is the tree that you want to impact with your succession plan, your family succession plan? How far and wide does it go? So when you know what you want, what your goals are, when you know basically what you have today, because it will change, and you know who matters to you, and that can also grow and change, you have a good foundation to get started with these types of discussions and the types of things that we need to be talking about. And so when you have those things in place, then you begin to look inward and you look at your family and you say, how do I have the unaccustomed conversations? How do I get my kids engaged? How do I get my parents engaged? Where do we start? And so one of the things that I think a really good point that came out as part of the Legacy Bridge, the first Legacy Bridge Roundtable, was our discussion about how to talk to kids about succession, about finance, about estates. And Tacy offers a really good example of something that she has used to engage with her clients' children.
Right. And begin to have conversations with your kids early, early. I can remember years ago when I was a Girl Scout troop leader, and we did jelly jars of money with the girls, and one was for charity, one was for savings, one was for gifts, and one was for you. And the girls came, and I gave them all $1, and they each, and I gave it in different increments, like not only quarters, but also dimes and nickels and whatever. And I said, you make your decisions about how you're spending this dollar. And so I think you have to have those conversations early.
And so when Tacy says have those conversations early, she gives a really good example. Just an exercise of having children proportion money where they want it to go for themselves, for spending, for saving, for church, for tithing, for different components. And you begin to teach children about values, about money, about assets, about how you want to think about moving them around so that they grow. So this is where it becomes multi-generational, and not just an individual life. This is where we're designing a legacy, not a life. And so conversations, they don't start when inheritance happens. Those unaccustomed conversations, that family boardroom, those things need to start much earlier. And so we can then begin to develop what I call bench strength within the family. We can identify gaps. We might identify in the family we have someone who likes math, who might be the family accountant. We might identify someone who's got very good counseling skills, and they might become the peacemaker. And every family needs a peacemaker, as I've talked about in different episodes. So you're going to identify some of the roles and responsibilities if you engage family members early on in the process. And so now that we have established about getting started and what it takes to getting started, we've established about being multi-generational. We've talked about where you are honestly as an individual. We've talked about who you love, who matters, and how all that works. Now we can talk about inheritance. And so we can talk about what inheritance really means. And so to do that, I think Shakisha does a really good job of trying to reframe inheritance and to give a definition of what inheritance truly means.
It depends on what kind of conversation you're trying to have, is what I would say. If you are an estate planning attorney, I'm very clear on what we mean when we say inheritance. I think if you're a lay person, meaning like you're not a professional in this space, inheritance can mean the things that are clearly passed down to you, meaning grandmama left me this house. Then there are the things where the administrative complexities are passed down to you, meaning grandmama left this house but did not actually give me this house, right? So you can have things that you have actually legally inherited. They were actually legally passed down to you. And then you have things that the processes weren't in place, which means that for you to actually get the inheritance, you're going to have to proactively go and do something, go and fix something. And then there's the silent inheritance, which is the skills that you were passed down, which is the emotional baggage that you carry, which is the trust or mistrust of certain structures and types of professionals. You know, there are feelings you may have coming in to talk to an attorney or a financial advisor that you never say, but that does come out in the work and the relationship.
And so what Shakisha laid out there may be the most important reframe, the rewind, because she really talks about inheritance as a number of things. Inheritance is the assets, it's the financial, it's the stuff that's the legal stuff, but it's also the systems within the family, within the business. It's the responsibilities, it's the emotions, it's the unresolved issues. We bring all that, and that crosses generations. And so when we think about it, we really want to make sure that we're starting to have the family conversations. And that's why we've included as a downloadable a copy of our 12 conversations every family should start having. And it's just a starter to help you sit down and have these conversations that resolve some of those issues, that surface some of those emotions, that lay out some of those generational responsibilities. And so you don't want your family to inherit confusion. We talk about legacy requires design. If it's done in default, it's chaos. And when inheritance comes with instructions, these things have been worked on and laid out over time, bit by bit, to allow generations to communicate with one another. That's the building and bridging that we like to talk about. And so, as you've heard throughout this conversation, most people are not stuck because they don't have enough. They're stuck because they haven't started. And they haven't started because of a number of reasons. But it doesn't require more money. It doesn't require more time. It doesn't require perfect conditions. And it certainly doesn't require all the answers. It requires honesty and clarity, intentionality, and just making one decision. So whether that's writing down what matters or having that first unaccustomed conversation or simply acknowledging where you are, that's where your legacy design begins. And it can begin now, not later. And so again, if something has touched you in this episode, we hope that you'll like, share, subscribe, engage with us. Let us know what you're going through so that we can have those conversations, because inheritance may begin by default, but legacy requires design. And so thank you for the time that you've granted me. Make one decision this week. Do just one thing. Just start. And then let's talk about it. God bless.